Hi, it's Katrina, the legend of the Ant People. In the southwestern part of the United States, also known as the Four Corners region, there are still some descendants of the Native American Hopi people living in the area. The Hopi were split into several tribes, including one formerly called the Anasazi. Now known as the ancestral Puebloans, these people lived in the desert and built huge dwellings on cliffs and rocks between 550 and 1300 AD. Then they vanished. The Hopi people's traditions were rooted deeply in nature with a respect for all living things. They lived according to natural law and believed in something a little different from most other religions of the ancient world. The Hopi didn't look to the sky and tell stories about gods in the heavens. Instead, they believed gods came from the ground and sprouted upwards like potatoes. They also believed that there were giant ants living inside the earth, like strange insect overlords that ruled everything from their subterranean lairs. That's not to say they didn't still have great respect for the stars in the sky. The major archaeological sites in the Four Corners match up almost perfectly with the constellation of Orion. It looks as if the Anasazi made their settlements based on the shape of Orion, with one settlement for each connecting star. And then there's the whole thing about the ants. Some experts believe it wasn't ants the Hopi Native Americans were talking about at all, but actual extraterrestrial beings who lived in the ground. This is reflected in many of the petroglyphs found throughout the southwestern United States, showing curious beings seeming to hold all the universe in their hands. Mysterious Viking Cave Network. In the summer of 2021, a series of very mysterious man-made caves were discovered southwest of Oddi, that's in Iceland, with the artificial caves dating back to the 10th century, to the era of the Vikings. In the recent past, researchers have worked very hard to excavate the mysterious tunnels and figure out just what in the world they were used for. What they've accomplished so far is to reveal a massive system of interconnected subterranean passages. This place is like a primitive underground labyrinth, like an ant's nest hidden underneath Iceland. And yet researchers still haven't been able to figure out the true purpose for the construction of such an immense and complex network of caverns. Archaeologist Kristborg Porsdotter said she had no words to describe the discovery. That's how mysterious it's been even for the scientists involved. Kristborg said that never before have such large structures been studied from the 10th century in Iceland. This could be the biggest building project the Vikings ever made, and yet experts can't figure out anything about it. What we do know is that Oddi was originally the seat of the Odvarjar clan, one of the most powerful groups in Viking history. Other things have been found nearby, like an old church, a farm, and a vicarage. Oddly enough, Oddi was one of the first places 1,000 years ago to build a church when Christianity found its way to Iceland. Still, that doesn't really help with the mysterious tunnels. Hopefully researchers will make some headway soon, or at least figure out how deep the mysterious caverns go. The Shaandar III cold case. The fossilized skeleton of a Neanderthal man was discovered inside the Shaandar cave in Iraq back in 1957. But between 1953 and 1960, 10 individuals were excavated from the same cave. It proved to be the largest single sample of Neanderthal fossils uncovered anywhere on the planet. But the one that was found in 1957 proved to be the most fascinating. Neanderthals date back to around 45,000 years ago. These were the very definition of cave people. They lived deep in the shady nooks and crannies of Iraq's caverns, where they slowly learned how to use stone tools and make fire. But that's not all they were learning in their cave homes. They were also figuring out how to commit murder. The skeleton is currently on display at the Hall of Human Origins, and from what the archaeologists can determine, this man is the oldest unsolved cold case in the world. An inspection of his bones revealed he was about 40 or 50 years old, stood about 5'6", and died from a stab wound to his chest. The depth of the wound shows that whatever he was stabbed with pierced his chest and collapsed his lung. We don't know for sure if that was what killed him, but it appears to be the very first known homicide, or at least attempted homicide. The Mini Coffins. In the 1830s, a group of schoolboys were hunting for rabbits in the Scottish countryside near Edinburgh. According to the legend, these boys found a small opening in a rock on the northeast side of Arthur's Seat, which is a local hill. Hidden in that small opening were 3 slabs of stone, and when the boys pushed those slabs of stone aside, they discovered 17 miniature coffins. The coffins were arranged in 3 rows, with each one just under 4 inches long. The coffins were made from pine wood and contained within them small humanoid figures. They looked like tiny sarcophagi with mummies inside of them. These bizarre relics became known as the Lilliputian coffins. To this day, experts don't have an answer for what they were doing behind those stone slabs. Each miniature doll buried inside its own little coffin has a unique set of clothing. These tiny pieces of fabric were stitched together and then glued around the figures, turning them into tiny people. It's all quite creepy, and nobody knows who put them there or why they were made. It's been almost 200 years, and all we have are theories. Some say the dolls were used in satanic spells or witchcraft. Some archaeologists think they could have been part of an ancient burial custom. But according to George Dalgleish, the keeper of Scottish history at the National Museum of Scotland, the coffins were probably connected to Burke and Hare. They were a pair of serial killers who murdered 17 people in Edinburgh, and many historians agree that they could have left exactly 17 tiny figures buried in coffins, representing their crimes. Treasure in the Seychelles. There is possibly a pirate treasure worth over $100 million hiding on an island in the Indian Ocean. Many islands in the Indian Ocean are said to be littered with treasure from one pirate or another, but this one is supposed to be the holy grail of pirate treasure, the biggest pile of loot never discovered, and the story of it has been passed down through the generations. It's said to be somewhere in the Seychelles, which means there are 115 potential islands where the treasure could be buried. The tale begins in 1716 with a pirate by the name of La Bousse, or the Buzzard. In 1721, La Bousse killed every man on board a Portuguese galleon in the port of Bourbon Island, today called La Réunion. This Portuguese galleon was filled to the brim with unbelievable treasures: gold, silver, raw diamonds, goblets made of pure gold, and gemstones. It was massive. Realizing they had struck actual gold, the pirates fled to their headquarters on the island nation of Madagascar. They divided the booty, La Bousse vanished, and he supposedly buried what he had taken somewhere in the Seychelles, probably on the island of Mahé. Still, this mystery is unsolved because nobody has ever found the treasure. A local resident named Reginald Herbert Cruz Wilkins searched for it for 27 years until he died in 1977. His son John, to this very day, is still looking for the lost treasure. Blackbeard's Silver Skull. In Hampton Roads, Virginia, there is a spot called Blackbeard's Point. It's said that after Blackbeard was killed in his last battle in the year 1718, his head was severed, put on a pole, and then erected at Blackbeard's Point overlooking the Chesapeake Bay. It was a deterrent for any who would turn to a life of piracy. The head of the famous pirate sat on that pole for several years until it vanished. After it was gone for some time, it showed up at a pub in Virginia. Somebody had lined the skull with silver so that it could be used as a drinking goblet. It traded hands multiple times for the next 200 years. Finally, in the 1950s, maritime historian Edward Rowe claimed to have come into possession of the skull. After he died in 1982, his widow finally handed the skull over to the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. The mystery here is that we don't actually know whose skull was sitting in the museum. It was definitely a human skull, but there was never any physical evidence that it actually belonged to the pirate captain. Even though the Peabody Essex Museum did lend the skull out at least one time for an art exhibit, the museum no longer has the silver-plated skull on display. The Sun Dagger. High atop the Fajada Butte in Chaco Canyon is something strange. There is a set of spiral petroglyphs carved into the cliff just behind 3 large slabs of rock. According to the experts, these are solar markers. On the summer solstice, a vertical shaft of light pierces through the main spiral precisely at its center. And on the winter solstice, 2 shafts of light do the exact same thing. And on the spring and fall equinoxes, slivers of light cover the center of the smaller spiral to show a change in seasons. Basically, at the top of the Fajada Butte is one of the oldest observatories in the world. It's now known as the Sun Dagger. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly who made this observatory, nor how they even figured out the complexity of it. The best guess archaeologists have is that it was the Anasazi, the mysterious Native Americans who built their desert homes nearby. But there is no way to know for sure, and unfortunately in 1989 the place was irreversibly damaged. Because of so many visitors climbing all over it, the sediment shifted and the light no longer hits the spiral on the summer solstice. This has rendered the observatory useless after roughly 1,000 years of working perfectly fine. The Festos Disc. On the Greek island of Crete, hidden in plain sight for 4,000 years, is an unsolvable mystery. It's called the Festos Disc, and it was found in the great Minoan palace of Festos. The disc was originally identified by an Italian archaeologist in the early 20th century. There are many different settlements and palaces scattered across the old Greek island, which was once home to the great Minoan civilization. And in all of them, researchers have found some kind of writing, be it tablets of Linear A at the Palace of Knossos or Linear B at the Hagia Triade site. But at Festos, there is no trace of any writing, and it made little sense considering how huge and regal this palace once was. There should have been some kind of writing somewhere, and in 1908, archaeologists found it by way of the Festos Disc. The artifact is a circle of clay about 16 inches in diameter. That's about the size of a frisbee. It was made in the 2nd millennium BC in the Bronze Age and is stamped with 241 unique tokens, which in total comprise 45 distinct signs. These were made by pressing seals into the disc when it was still soft. The mystery is that nobody has ever decoded these 241 tokens. We know the tablet says something, but nobody knows what. It's so confusing that most archaeologists have simply chalked it up to a hoax, even though it's confirmed at over 2,000 years old. Maybe archaeologists are so stumped they'd just rather pretend the disc didn't exist at all. You should probably take a crack at it and see if you can decipher the code. Giant footprints. Some photographs have been circulating of a man's bare foot resting inside of a giant footprint stamped into the rock. This footprint is surprising because it's clearly about 5 times larger than the average man's foot. The only thing that may have left a footprint like that would have been a dinosaur, and yet judging by the shape of the print and its distinctly human toes, it appears to have been made by an enormous person. Of course, we don't know if this is true. The original story appeared in 2016. It said the footprint was first discovered in fossilized rock in the Pingyan village of China's Guizhou province, but there have been no professional archaeologists who have confirmed this. All we have are a few pictures, a flaky story, and some amateur archaeologists who claim the humanoid footprint is 200 million years old. So, while fascinating to think that giants could have existed all that time ago, nobody can definitively say they didn't. But according to experts, this particular footprint is probably a fake. The Yade Girl. The corpse of the Yade Girl was discovered by Dutch laborers in a swampy bog back in 1897. She quickly became the world's most infamous bog mummy. She died 2,000 years ago, possibly at the hands of an executioner or some crazed cultist who used her as a human sacrifice. She died between the years 54 BC and 128 AD. She was discovered with a rope still tight around her neck, stab wounds around her collarbone, 1 foot and 1 hand cut off, and part of her pelvis stuck in the mud. As if all this wasn't horrible enough, the girl was only 16 when she wound up in the bog. Plus, researchers believe she had a major case of scoliosis and barely stood over 4 feet tall. Nobody knows for sure what happened on the day of her death all those thousands of years ago, but using the archaeological evidence for inspiration, researchers have a pretty good idea about why she was killed. They think that because of her scoliosis, the girl was singled out to be used in a ritual child sacrifice. She was taken away from the borders of her village, there was a small ceremony, and she was stabbed, strangled, and thrown in the muck. It's technically still unsolved, but this is the best theory that anyone has come up with. Rare Roman sarcophagus. Diving school trainer Hakan Güleç was swimming in the waters off Antalya, Turkey in 2012 when he spotted a mysterious out-of-place object on the seabed, covered in sand and rocks. He tried to move it but failed, and the attempt revealed carved figures in the process. Realizing that he may have discovered something important, Güleç snapped some photos and showed them to officials from the nearby Alanya Museum. The object in question turned out to be a sarcophagus dating back to the 2nd or 3rd century BC. Experts traced it to the Roman era and identified some of the carvings as depictions of deities and mythical characters, including Eros and Medusa. Authorities decided that the sarcophagus would make a nice addition to the museum's collection, and also decided to bring it out of the water. It took hours and hours, but in the end, the mission was a success. Ancient Carthaginian galleys. On March 10, 241 BC, a fleet of Roman ships destroyed an armada of Carthaginian vessels off Sicily's northwestern coast, causing them to sink to the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. The battle marked the end of the First Punic War, with Rome emerging victorious against Carthage. During maritime battles like this, warships deliberately crashed into each other in an effort to sink the enemy, or to get close enough to board the enemy ship and face off in hand-to-hand combat. Vessels were equipped with metal rams to protect against damage and maximize the destruction against the enemy. The remains of some of the wrecked ships from that ill-fated battle have been found scattered along the sea floor, where they've sat for over 2,000 years. A study published last year revealed that one submerged bronze ram was home to over 100 marine species, who have repurposed the sunken vessels as their homes. The hollow metal object was recovered and restored in 2017. As part of the process, the team collected and studied samples of the organisms living on it. They also examined the ram itself, which is covered with Punic inscriptions that have yet to be deciphered. By taking a closer look at the ancient debris and what's living on it, experts are learning about the past, and researchers are gaining a better understanding of how underwater creatures incorporate man-made objects into their natural habitat. A Crusader Sword. While exploring the waters off Israel's Carmel coast in 2021, an amateur scuba diver named Shlomi Katzen discovered a collection of ancient artifacts, including anchors, pottery fragments, and a 900-year-old sword that may have belonged to a Crusader knight. Archaeologists with the Israel Antiquities Authority, or the IAA, described the nearly 3-foot-long iron blade as a beautiful and rare find. It was used sometime during the Crusader period, which lasted from 1095 to 1291. The anchors that Katzen discovered date back 4,000 years to the late Bronze Age. These fascinating finds mark the latest of several recent discoveries of ancient artifacts in the region, which has natural coves that functioned as a refuge for merchant ships during storms. Many of these vessels left behind historically valuable items that are just now being found, thanks to waves and shifting undercurrents moving the sand along the sea floor. IAA Marine Archaeology Unit Director Kobe Sharvit told National Public Radio that even small storms can shift sands, revealing certain parts of the seabed while burying others. Objects from the past are also surfacing more often because leisure diving is on the rise. Sharvit emphasized the importance of leaving any discoveries in place and reporting them to authorities so that they can be documented properly. Katzen received a Certificate of Appreciation of Good Citizenship for alerting the IAA to the sword, which will go on public display after it's been cleaned and restored. A Lost Empire's Gold. Between the 7th and 11th centuries, the powerful Srivijaya Empire controlled much of Asia's maritime trade. The civilization was headquartered on what is now the Indonesian island of Sumatra in the city of Palembang. It left behind little archaeological evidence, leaving modern experts with limited knowledge of what the Srivijaya Empire was like. No traces of the city's buildings have been found, perhaps because they were buried by a volcano, or because they were made from wood and deteriorated. Much of what researchers know about Srivijaya comes from the eyewitness accounts of travelers who passed through. It was reportedly rich in gold, and used its wealth to build advantageous relationships with China and other powerful societies. The empire also financed Buddhist monasteries and temples in China, Java, and India. No official archaeological excavations have been carried out in the area, but people began finding coins, jewelry, and other treasure along the Musi River in 2011, and the discoveries continue to this day. Late last year, divers found gold rings, beads, precious gems, a Buddha statue, and other objects that are thought to be from the Srivijaya Empire. British maritime archaeologist Sean Kingsley suspects that Srivijaya was a floating city made out of wood, which rotted after the city's abandonment and caused artifacts to sink to the bottom of the river. Indonesia imposed a moratorium on underwater archaeology back in 2010, but this isn't enough to stop people from conducting their own dives in search of valuable items, and those who find artifacts by chance are unlikely to report their discoveries. Unfortunately, this leaves experts empty-handed and unable to learn more about the mysterious civilization and its unexplained collapse. What would you do if you discovered sunken treasure? Would you report it or keep it for yourself? Let me know in the comments. Want to give a big shout out to Tracy Demond and Gary Just Johnson. You guys are awesome. We wouldn't be here without you. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. Stele of Tonis Heraklion. Around 440 BC, the Greek writer Herodotus described a coastal city that became known as Heraklion. Experts spent decades searching for it underwater until French archaeologist Frank Gaudio finally found it off Egypt's northern coast in Abu Qir Bay. Among the ruins, Gaudio's team found a large stone containing inscriptions about a town called Tonis. Before then, researchers had widely believed that Tonis and Heraklion were two different places, but the hieroglyphics proved that they were actually one place that went by two names. To the Greeks, it was Heraklion, while Egyptians called it Tonis. Pharaoh Nectanebo I commissioned the stele of Tonis Heraklion sometime during his reign, which lasted from 378 to 362 BC. A nearly identical stone was found at the ancient city of Naucratis, with the only difference being the column in which the location's name was carved. The tablet's decree states that 10% of all taxes from local productions and imports must go toward a temple in the eastern Nile Delta of Lower Egypt, dedicated to the Egyptian deity Neith. Divers at Tonis Heraklion also found a nearly 18-foot-tall, 6.6-ton red granite statue of Hapi, a divine personification of Nile floods. It dates back to the 4th century BC, and it's the largest known Hapi statue ever found. It might be pronounced Hapi, but you'll remember the god's name if I say Hapi. Tonis Heraklion experienced an earthquake during the 2nd century BC that liquefied the ground beneath it, causing the city to sink into the sea. And until its relatively recent rediscovery, experts were stuck wondering if it was a purely mythical place. Battersea Shield. In 1857, workers dredged up an ancient bronze shield from the Thames River in London while excavating ahead of the construction of the historic Chelsea Bridge. It's made from several pieces that are held together by rivets and is decorated in the style of the Celtic Latin culture. Known as the Battersea Shield, the object would have been used as a covering for a wooden shield. It's considered one of the most significant pieces of Celtic art ever discovered in Britain, but its origins are a mystery. For one, nobody can say for sure when the shield was made or used. The Museum of London dated it to sometime between 350 and 50 BC, but some experts think it may have been made during the early 1st century AD. The workers who discovered the Battersea Shield also found skeletons, as well as large amounts of Roman and Celtic weapons. Consequently, some historians theorize that the shield was left behind during Julius Caesar's invasion of Britain in 54 BC. But most modern scholars challenge this view. The bronze plating that the shield is made from is too thin to have protected someone during combat, and it contains no sign of battle-related damage. So it's likely that the Battersea Shield was created as a way for someone to show off their social status, or as a parade piece, and then was deposited into the river as a religious offering. Most researchers who agree with this also think that the shield predates Caesar's invasion in 54 BC. Interestingly, the artifact features swastika-like symbols, which in today's world represents hatred and bigotry, but at the time the shield was created, it represented good luck and solar energy. In the ancient world, the symbol wasn't evil, but was known as the whirling sun. The lost temple of Hercules Gaditanus. Earlier this year, archaeologists near Cadiz, Spain, announced that they may have discovered an ancient pilgrimage site called the Temple of Hercules Gaditanus. Famous historical figures such as Julius Caesar and Hannibal reportedly visited the site, which dates back to the 8th century BC and is being called the Holy Grail of artifacts. The temple is submerged in a small channel called the Caño de Sancti Petri. Archaeology graduate student Ricardo Belizon was the first to detect the site while examining images that were taken using remote sensing technology called LiDAR, which enables experts to see hidden and buried objects. He noticed a 1,000-foot-long, 500-foot-wide structure near the shore, which matched the description of the lost temple. The team has been unable to excavate the underwater ruins because of the marshy environment's shifting water levels, but they are making plans to do so. These challenging conditions fall in line with the historical description of the temple, which may have been built by the Phoenicians. Ancient texts about Hannibal's and Julius Caesar's visits describe the site as a changing environment in contact with the sea, subject to the changing tides. Not all experts believe that the structure is the mythical temple of Hercules. Archaeology professor Antonio Monterroso Checa, who authored a study in 2020 claiming that the temple is in another location, stands by his findings and attributes the new research to a triangulation error with no reality at all. For now, the claims in both studies remain unproven, but it looks like there's quite a bit of competition going on. The Port of Amethyst. The Port of Amethyst was an artificial harbor that was likely built during the 3rd or 4th century BC, near the modern-day city of Limassol in what is now Cyprus. Experts described it as an impressive but short-lived large public port project of the Hellenistic period, which may never have been completed. It contains 3 piers made from large rectangular stones, which protected the ships from strong winds. Today, the ancient port's outer harbor sits 13 feet underwater and extends 328 feet from the shore. Sadly, it appears as though the site was never used for its intended purpose. The area was abandoned entirely by the 6th century, most likely due to Arab raids, although archaeologists don't know for sure why the population of Amethyst fled. A team led by Dr. Jean-Yves Empereur first excavated the submerged site during the 1980s. In 2005, an artificial reef was established among the ruins. It has unfortunately caused a lot of stress to the structures. Now, officials want to turn the site into an underwater park. The plan is causing tensions between people who want to preserve the harbor and those who are more concerned with protecting a marine plant called Neptune grass. Authorities are pushing forward with the plans and have promised the public that they will protect both the submerged rooms and the Neptune grass, which is vital to aquatic ecosystems in the Mediterranean. Ancient ships full of wine. In the summer of 2021, scientists announced the discovery of an ancient Roman shipwreck off the coast of Palermo, Sicily. Dating back to the 2nd century BC, the vessel rests over 300 feet beneath the waves near the town of Isola delle Femmine, which sits along the island's northwestern shore. Using a submarine robot, the team noticed that the ship was carrying an extensive amount of wine jars, or amphorae. The discovery came just weeks after another group of researchers found another ancient wreck off the island of Ustica, which is located north of Sicily. It rests at a depth of around 230 feet and was also found to contain a copious amount of wine. These are just 2 of many Roman shipwrecks that have been discovered throughout the Mediterranean. In recent years, the Italian authorities have stepped up their fight against the black market, which recovers hundreds of stolen amphorae from people's homes every year. It's important to prevent valuable artifacts from falling into shady hands whenever possible, because moving an object from where it was found takes away the opportunity to study it in its proper context. By investigating the newly discovered wrecks and their cargo firsthand, researchers can learn more about ancient trade in the Mediterranean, where the Romans exchanged wine, olives, and other products with merchants in North Africa, Spain, France, and the Middle East. Bronze Age gold jewelry. Sometime during the late 14th century BC, a ship wrecked off the coast of what is now Uluburun, Turkey. The submerged vessel was discovered by a sponge diver in 1982 and has been hailed as one of the most spectacular Bronze Age wrecks ever found. Archaeologists recovered a plethora of fascinating artifacts, including 10 tons of copper ingots and other items made from raw copper, as well as 149 Canaanite jars, which are typically found in Greece, Cyprus, Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. The earliest known intact glass ingots were also found in the wreck, along with numerous gold artifacts, including figurines, beads, and jewelry. There were also amber beads, ivory objects, pottery, oil lamps, and more. Based on the ship's cargo, experts have theorized it departed from a port in Cyprus or Syria-Palestine. They are almost certain that it was headed for the region west of Cyprus to a port in the Aegean Sea, maybe mainland Greece. Some researchers believe that the vessel may have been destined for the Greek island of Rhodes, which functioned as an important regional distribution center at the time. The priceless Golden Horde. The Panagiouriște treasure is an ancient hoard of artifacts from the days of the Thracians, found in Bulgaria back in December 1949. A trio of brothers were digging clay to make bricks when they came across the unexpected hoard. They discovered an amphora container, animal sculptures, jewelry, and 7 artifacts called rhytons, all of them made from 24-karat gold. At first, the brothers thought they had found hidden brass instruments used by the gypsies. It wasn't until the curator of the local museum, Dr. Peter Gorbanov, arrived that they learned the treasure was from around the 4th century BC. That makes it nearly 2,500 years old. The artifacts are now believed to have been some kind of ceremonial set gifted to the legendary Thracian king, Seuthes III. The brothers handed the treasure over to the local authorities, who then put it in a vault at the Bulgarian National Bank. There are 3 copies exhibited around the world, but authorities locked the genuine treasure up tight in the vault. Unfortunately, we don't have the exact monetary value of the treasure. It's pretty much priceless. It's made up of almost 14 pounds of pure gold, and the fact that it was made by the Thracians and is so well preserved, the Bulgarian government is not going to let anyone get their paws on it to appraise the treasure. Celtic coin hoard. The government of Jersey, a small island on the English Channel, recently purchased one of the largest coin hoards in the entire world. A set of coins from the Iron Age was just purchased for a sum of roughly $4,500,000, paid by the Council of Ministers using the Civil Asset Recovery Fund. This is money that the government has taken from criminals. The official name of the treasure collection is Lekatillon II Hoard, and a pair of amateur metal detector enthusiasts found it in 2012. Reg Mead and Richard Miles had been searching the area for 30 years looking for treasure. They began the quest decades ago when a local woman came to them with an ancient pot filled with silver Celtic coins. Her father had found it in a field near their home. She didn't know the exact location where her father had found the pot, but she pointed them in the right direction. It just took Reg and Richard 3 more decades to locate the rest of it. But their patience paid off. They dug up over 68,000 coins. These coins weren't sitting in treasure chests or locked in strong boxes. They were all melted together in a huge and solid chunk of ancient money. It took researchers 3 years to break the coins apart and separate them into individual pieces. French Celts probably buried the coins hiding out on the island around 30 BC, 2,000 years ago in the days of Julius Caesar. It's likely these Celts had fled the Roman invasion and took a massive fortune with them. When it was originally discovered, experts valued it at $10 million. Bactrian Gold. Experts say the lost Bactrian gold is worth billions of dollars. The Afghan government supposedly discovered it in February 2004, hidden inside the presidential palace. But since then, the treasure has gone missing, and nobody knows where it is. The president at the time of its original discovery, Hamid Karzai, said the treasure was hiding in sealed vaults beneath his official residence, and apparently nobody knew it was there. It's hard to believe the president of Afghanistan didn't know he was sitting on millions and millions of dollars worth of treasure from the days of Alexander the Great, but that was the official statement. Most of the treasure comes from 327 BC, when Alexander stormed through the region with his army, crippling the Persians. It supposedly comprises over 20,000 gold, silver, and ivory artifacts. These artifacts were made in all different parts of the ancient world, from Tajikistan to Iran. There were also Roman coins, coins with Buddhist imagery from the Far East, bronze Chinese mirrors, carved Indian ivory, and ancient Greek rings. Alexander collected the treasure left behind in the city and was kept safe by the rulers throughout the years. Then, in more modern times, the treasure was stashed in secret vaults by historians at the museum in Kabul, kept safe from the greedy hands of the country's presidents. Now, the Bactrian gold is gone, and we don't know where it went. The most recent reports say the Taliban, who have taken over Afghanistan, is currently searching for it, though it remains missing. The gold double leopard. One of the most important and valuable coins in England is a rare Edward III gold double leopard. It's one of only 3 remaining coins from the rule of Edward III, and one of the earliest coins ever minted in England. Edward III ruled in the 14th century during the 100 Years' War that pitted England against France. In 1340, Edward declared himself both the King of England and the King of France, and the war continued for another 20 years before officially ending. This was at the height of medieval England. The country was rich, Edward held jousting and fighting tournaments, and he founded the Chivalric Order of the Greater in 1344, the same year this magical coin was printed. Membership in the order was limited to the king and his 24 most trusted knights. Many believe it was the original inspiration for the Round Table of King Arthur. 2 examples of this coin are in museums in England, while another is floating around somewhere. In its time, the huge gold coin was worth 6 shillings, with 1 shilling being worth 12 silver pennies. To give you an idea of how much that was worth, most ordinary English citizens only made a few pennies a week. At the time this coin was minted, no other gold coins had been made in the past 600 years. And almost immediately after, gold coinage stopped and didn't pick up again until much later. In 2022, a similar coin was found by a guy with a metal detector that sold at auction for nearly $200,000. The Black Swan Project. The Black Swan Project led to the amazing discovery of the wreck of Nuestra Señora de las Mercedes, a ship filled with treasure that capsized during the brutal Battle of Cape Santa Maria in 1804. A company based in Florida called Odyssey Marine Exploration led the project. They came across a stash of coins at the bottom of the ocean weighing around 17 tons. This puts pretty much every other coin hoard to shame. This is because there are so many coins. The ship was part of a Spanish fleet that lost some ships off the coast of Portugal. It was carrying tons of silver, as well as cinnamon and quinoa on its way to Spain. The British Navy spotted it and sank it as soon as they could, although they probably regretted not being able to get the silver. The discovery of the treasure in 2007 led to a very long legal battle between the Florida company and the Spanish government. It cost the company about $2,600,000 to retrieve the treasure from the sea. A resolution finally came in February 2012. The courts awarded the treasure to the Spanish government, and as an extra kick in the mouth, Odyssey Marine Exploration had to pay the Spanish government $1 million for abusive litigation. This left them at a negative of nearly $4 million. I don't know if deep sea exploration is worth it for that price. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Sculpture of Tutankhamun. A sculpture of Tutankhamun's head, the great boy pharaoh of ancient Egypt, just sold for a whopping $6 million. His sculpture is 3,300 years old, but nobody knows exactly where it was found. We know that before the sale, the mysterious artifact had been kept in a secretive German art collection since the year 1985. And before that, it had been in the possession of a German aristocrat named Prince Wilhelm von Thurn. As for Tutankhamun, he was one of the most famous kings of Egypt. He ruled for 9 years and died just before his 20th birthday. He was only 10 when he took the throne, but was gone by the age of 19. The British archaeologist Howard Carter uncovered his tomb in 1922 near Luxor, complete with all its burial treasures. It was one of the greatest finds ever. What makes this sale even more interesting is that Egypt is furious. The artifact, which is carved from brown quartzite and shows the boy king wearing the glorious crown of the god Amun, is technically Egyptian property. It was taken from somewhere in Egypt and given to a rich German man decades ago, and Egypt wants it back. Instead, it was sold to an unnamed buyer for a ridiculous amount, and Egypt was told, in so many words, to just deal with it. Stolen artifacts. A New York antiquities collector recently had to return a whopping 180 stolen artifacts. Together, these treasures are worth $70 million. According to the New York Times, billionaire Michael H. Steinhardt was forced to give up his antique collection. He is one of the most prolific collectors in the world and has been banned from purchasing any more artifacts for the rest of his life. This was agreed in a deal he made with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. His having to give up the treasures was part of an investigation that went on for 4 years. Investigators traced dozens of looted relics directly back to his apartment and office. Most of these treasures were smuggled out of various countries using criminal networks, black markets, and forged paperwork. The illegal antiquities market is very real, and a lot of billionaires seem to have their toes dipped in it. One of Michael's stolen artifacts was a magnificent piece called the Larnax. The Larnax was a mysterious chest used for holding human remains on the Greek island of Crete over 3,200 years ago. Michael also had a ceremonial vessel from 400 BC, a fresco stolen from a Roman villa at Herculaneum, and a golden bowl pillaged from the legendary site of Nimrud in Iraq. The San Jose. The San Jose is the most valuable shipwreck ever discovered. It's not only worth millions, but billions. When the San Jose galleon sank in 1708 after leaving South America with its holds filled to the brim with stolen treasure, it was destroyed. It sank to the bottom of the Caribbean with gold, silver, and jewelry worth $20 billion in today's money. It also sank with 600 human lives aboard, but their bones have long since decayed. All that remains are a few shards of wood from the ship and all of its precious jewels. The San Jose was part of a Spanish fleet trying to make it across the ocean back to the motherland to deliver untold riches to the king. But the ship got into a battle with the British in the late afternoon off the coast of Cartagena, Colombia, and by the time the sun had set, the galleon was under the waves and destroyed. For centuries, this mysterious ship remained lost on the ocean floor. It wasn't until 2015 that the Colombian government announced they had finally found it. All these years later, the galleon is still sitting underneath 1,800 feet of water. It's also at the center of a custody dispute. Spain says that they own it, and Colombia says they own it, since it's in their waters. As of 2022, Colombia is the one moving forward with plans to salvage over 200 tons of the sunken treasure. The Schroda Treasure. The Schroda Treasure is a hoard of fantastically valuable silver and gold coins, as well as heaps of precious stones and unbelievable gold jewelry. The treasure dates back to the 14th century, with its largest component being 3,000 pieces of silver. Crews discovered it during demolition at a building project in Poland in June 1985. The authorities quickly swooped in and bought the treasure for themselves, and no archaeological studies were carried out. Then, 3 years later, during yet another demolition in the same place, an even bigger piece of the hoard was found. Again, the authorities took it. But this time, they didn't get there quick enough, and much of the treasure was looted. In the days that followed, local residents started searching the landfills where rubble from other demolished buildings had been left, discovering overlooked pieces of jewelry that was centuries old. In the end, we don't know how many pieces of treasure were buried here in Poland because people got away with so much of it. Most of these stolen pieces probably got sold in the black market. The treasure, according to archaeologists, belonged to King Charles IV of the House of Luxembourg. Historical records show that in the year 1348, or close to it, he pawned an enormous collection of items to the Jewish banker Muscho in the town of Schroda. Nobody ever reclaimed the treasure, and there have been legends about it in the region ever since. As it turns out, the banker must have buried the treasure, then either forgot where he put it or never had time to go back for it. In 2001, the lowest value of the treasure was estimated at $50 million, and that was pushed up to $100 million in 2005. The Gilded Coffin. The Metropolitan Museum of Art purchased a gilded coffin from the 1st century BC back in July 2017. The New York Museum purchased the piece from a Paris art dealer for a shocking $4 million. It's an incredible coffin, covered completely in gold, made of wood and bronze. It originally held the mummy of a high-ranking priest of the ram god Hereshef, who operated out of a major temple in Heracleopolis. It's arguably one of the most elaborate and valuable coffins ever taken out of Egypt. And even though we know where it comes from and who was buried inside of it, nobody knew until after the huge purchase that it had been looted previously in 1936. It was stored in the collection of a man named Habib Tawadros. Then later, the coffin was transferred to Switzerland, given a fake export license in the 1970s, and then stolen in 2011 before being sold to the museum in New York. But regardless of where it's been or who it belongs to, it's still one of the most valuable coffins ever discovered. Few museums these days will pay $4 million for an Egyptian relic, especially not one that belonged to a simple priest, someone that most people have never even heard of. Thanks for watching! How much is too much to pay for an ancient artifact? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe and come back soon for more shocking archaeological videos. See you later. Bye!